$11 billion for a single ship is more than the GDP of some countries. But thanks to the United States, it is floating on water, ready to launch war from the sea. But before we do a complete breakdown on this ship, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the latest technological news. The naval warfare. Let's talk about the USS John F. Kennedy with the hull number CVN-79. It isn't just any other aircraft carrier added to the fleet, it is a complete innovation of what naval power means in the 21st century. This ship stretches over 1090 feet long and displaces around 10,000 tons at full load. Kennedy is the second ship in the Ford class, which is a new generation of supercarriers designed to replace the already existing Nimitz-class that served since the 1970s. However, size alone doesn't tell the story, because what makes this carrier revolutionary is what is hidden in the flight deck. Moreover, if we talk about the technology that turns her from a massive piece of floating steel into the most lethal power projection platform, it's going to blow your mind to understand why Kennedy even existed. We must understand what she is replacing. Currently, the Nimitz-class carriers are the marvels of their era. They can be called floating cities that can launch airstrikes thousands of miles from American shores for decades. They were unstoppable symbols of American dominance. But by 1990, things started going badly for them. These ships required crews of over 5,000 sailors. The steam catapult system, which was based on technology from World War II, stressed aircraft airframes and limited the type of aircraft that they could launch. They even generated limited electrical energy, capping their ability to integrate some of the most modern weapons. The maintenance costs were horrific, consuming billions annually just to keep them operational. The Navy knew that it needed to do something different, and for decades, they have been planning for it. In the end, they didn't just plan to upgrade Nimitz, they built a new design from the ground up for modern warfare. In the late 1900s, planning began for what would become the Ford class. The goals were simple yet ambitious. Reduce crew requirements by a whopping 20%. Increase sortie rates by 30%. Lower the operating cost of the ship over its 50-year lifespan by billions. Create electrical capacity to power weapons that didn't even exist yet. It was a huge order. Most people thought it was impossible, but the Navy pushed forward and created the CVN-78, which is the USS Gerald R. Ford that was commissioned in 2017 after years of delays and overruns. Then came Kennedy, which is the second ship in its class. In many ways, this ship was meant to fix mistakes that were made with the Ford. The lead ship in any new class always faced challenges. For example, systems didn't work as planned, the costs were huge, and the schedules were slipping everywhere. Ford experienced all of this and became a lightning rod for criticism about wasteful defense spending and overly ambitious technology. But every lesson learned from Ford's painful birth has been applied to Kennedy. Engineers redesigned problem components, then contractors refined the construction process, and the Navy adjusted its expectations. This gave them the ship that costs just shy of $2 billion less than her predecessor while delivering the same revolutionary capacity and, in many cases, even better. The new tech. But here is what makes the Kennedy carrier so innovative. If we walk on the flight deck, the first thing we'll notice is something that is actually missing compared to other carriers. It is steam. For over a century, aircraft carriers used steam catapults to hurl planes into the air. That system worked, but barely. There were basically mechanical nightmares that would require constant maintenance and cost their ship owners billions of dollars in total. It was also the limiting factor because it would limit the amount and the type of aircraft that could safely launch from the carrier. Lighter drones would easily be torn apart, heavier next-generation fighters might exceed the system's capacity. Kennedy uses something completely different. It uses the electromagnetic aircraft launch system instead of using steam pressure. This system uses an induction motor, which is the same technology that powers roller coasters and even maglev trains, to accelerate aircraft down the flight deck. The advantages are quite revolutionary, because EMALS delivers smooth, precise acceleration that is tailored to each aircraft's weight and requirements. Let's say there is an F-35 that is 44 tons. It gets a different launch profile than a heavier or lighter war machine. This system can launch everything from light drones to heavy strike fighters without requiring any extra modification. And since it's electrically powered, it requires far less maintenance than steam catapults. If we talk about EMALS, it was also Ford's biggest headache. Early versions suffered catastrophic failures. It went down far more than the reliable old system. Launches would abort and systems would overheat a lot. The entire system faced a lot of backlash and even threats of cancellation at some point. Engineers worked around the clock to diagnose problems, redesign components, and improve their reliability. By the time Kennedy used this system, most of these issues were already solved. Even though there are testing videos that show this system performing significantly better than Ford's early version. On the other hand, landing is just as important as launching. Here, Kennedy has another revolutionary system, which is advanced arresting gear. Traditional arresting cables used hydraulic systems to catch the incoming air flights, but AG uses water turbine technology to provide much smoother and more controlled stops. It also adjusts to different aircraft weights, reducing wear on air films and extending their service lives. AG faced reliability problems initially, but since its installation at Kennedy's, it has been fixed. Together, both of these systems allow Kennedy to launch and recover aircraft much faster than any carrier in history. The Navy projects that she can sustain 160 sorties per day during normal operation, with such capability reaching 270 sorties when needed. Compared to the Nimitz-class, it only had 120 sorties, which is much less than what we can now achieve. More sorties mean more targets can be bombed, and there are more flights, more air superiority patrols in high-intensity conflict. That kind of difference could determine victory or even defeat. If you're realizing how much power projection this ship represents, please subscribe to the channel, because what's coming next will definitely shock you. The power. What you might be wondering is what exactly is the power source that can handle all of this madness that Kennedy provides. Sitting on the flight deck are two Bechtel A1B nuclear reactors, each generating roughly 300 MW of thermal power. This is insane. There aren't any propulsion plants. They are beating every single thing that can be found in the carrier. Together, these reactors produce nearly 3 times the electrical power of a Nimitz-class carrier reactor. The surplus isn't just for show, it's designed to support weapon systems that are still in development and will be deployed later. Imagine directed energy weapons, essentially military-grade lasers that can shoot down incoming missiles and drones at the speed of light. Current destroyers and cruisers suffer heavily to generate enough electricity to power these systems, but Kennedy was designed with every single limitation in mind. Her reactors can feed the power-hungry laser systems while still running the ship, launching aircraft, and operating sensors. The Navy hasn't installed those weapons yet, but when they are ready, Kennedy will already be there to accommodate them too. The same goes for electromagnetic railguns, experimental weapons that use a magnetic field to fire a projectile at hypersonic speed without explosives. The system demands huge electrical input, and thanks to these reactors, Kennedy gets the capacity to test and eventually deploy them. Even if these specific weapons never materialize, having excess electrical capacity is never a bad thing. This also means that it emerges over a 50-year service life, which is insane. The future-proofing is done here at the most fundamental level. There are also advanced weapon elevators, because instead of using cables and hydraulics to move bombs and missiles from storage magazines to flight decks, Kennedy uses electromagnetic systems that are similar to EMALS. These elevators are faster, more reliable, and require less maintenance than the traditional system. They can move ordnance to aircraft Emirates instead of ours, but when they were used at Ford, it was more of an embarrassment, years of being scheduled and plagued with failures. Out of 11 planned elevators, only a handful worked when Ford was commissioned. The rest came slowly and painfully through years of trial and testing, but Kennedy benefited from that suffering. Her elevator incorporated fixes and design improvements while suggesting that they perform much better than Ford's initial installation system. The innovative crew. Here's something that is quite underrated when it comes to the Kennedy career. Despite being one of the largest warships ever built in humanity's history, she requires just shy of 4,300 sailors. Compared to the previous Nimitz-class that we have, it had 5,100, which means that 800 people have been reduced. This might not sound dramatic, but over a 50-year lifespan, it represents billions of dollars in savings. Fewer sailors would also mean lower personal costs, reduced food and supply requirements, and even smaller living quarters. It also means that each sailor must be more skilled, more technically trained, and capable of handling multiple responsibilities. This is a broader change in naval operations and how they have always worked. Modern warships are increasingly automated computer systems handling tasks that once required dozens of people. Kennedy's propulsion systems, damage control, network control, and weapon handling are all digitally controlled and monitored from a centralized station rather than being scattered throughout the ship. However, automation does create vulnerability. Cyber attacks could potentially disable systems that won't have manual backups. Technical failures and a centralized network could halt the ship from normal working, and training sailors to operate this complex system could take more time and money. The Navy had completely redesigned the training pipelines to prepare new crews for the Kennedy. Living conditions have also been dramatically improved compared to old carriers. Kennedy has a much better but thoughtful system with more privacy, improved air conditioning and ventilation, upgraded medical facilities, and a modern communication system that lets stay in touch with families even during deployment. These improvements are just comfort there about making sure that the people who are protecting the United States get the benefit of their hard work as well. The cost. But there is a problem: $11 billion. Let that number sink in. Kennedy costs more than the annual defense budgets of most countries. Critics argue that it represents everything that is wrong with the American defense system. The budgets are way through the roof, and the systems are overly complex, while priorities are misplaced everywhere. These criticisms aren't baseless. China and Russia have both developed anti-ship ballistic missiles that are specifically designed to target carriers. The DF-21D and DF-26 missiles give them the ability to threaten carriers hundreds of miles away from the Western Pacific. Russia's Zircon hypersonic missile can also travel fast, with much more advanced defense that makes it hard to intercept. The Navy's response is that carriers remain one of the most versatile power projection tools in existence. But in the future, we might see a huge battle between two systems that are made to cancel each other out. Do you think Kennedy is a good move by the American Navy? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date.